28 February 2009. Saturday, 5 a.m. All 4 rugby players arrived at the marina. Their plan for today was to enjoy a relaxed weekend fishing trip. These 4 were Nick Schuyler, Will Bleakley, Corey Smith, and Marquis Cooper. Their friendship had started through rugby, and now they were like brothers. Little did they know that this seemingly ordinary weekend was going to change their lives forever. Will was going into the ocean for the first time. That's why he was very excited. He asked whether the sea would be very rough. Marcus said it might be a little rough because he wanted to reach the fishing spot before the storm arrived. The moment Will heard the word storm, he became alert. He asked what the weather was like. Marcus told the truth, that a big storm was coming. But he had calculated the timing. They would finish fishing by 3 to 4 p.m. and return before evening. The bad weather would arrive late at night. Hearing the plan, Will calmed down a little, but the fear in his heart didn't completely go away. Corey took out a waterproof bag and asked everyone to put their phones inside. He said that sea salt could damage the phones, and anyway, there would be no signal once they were a few miles out. Will agreed this made sense, but he still confirmed, is there a radio on the boat? Marcus joked that there were 2 straws and a long rope. Everyone laughed. Then, turning serious, he said yes, there is a radio. Will admitted, slightly embarrassed, that maybe he was being overly cautious, but the restlessness inside him was still there, somewhere. 6:30 a.m., the boat was moving toward the deep sea. Everything looked beautiful. But at that very moment, back on land, the weather department was warning on TV about strong cold winds and a major storm. Meteorologists were calling it upper atmospheric turbulence. Nick's mother, seeing the weather report, immediately called him. The phone rang for a while and then went to voicemail because the phone was locked in the waterproof bag. The mother left a message saying she had seen the weather news and just wanted to confirm that Nick knew about the storm. The worry in her voice was clear, but this message would never be heard. Hip-hop music was playing on the boat. They reached the first fishing spot and cast their lines. Nick was lucky. He quickly caught a big fish. He happily started showing it to everyone. Marcus had named that spot Cooper's Hole and said this place never disappoints. Nick joked that the name sounded weird to say. Meanwhile, Will's eyes fell on the gleaming ring on Corey's finger. It was the 2002 Super Bowl championship ring he had won with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It was the greatest achievement of his career. But glory doesn't last long. A little while later, Marquis decided to go into deeper water. The boat moved forward again at high speed. That's when Nick's face started turning pale. The jolts of the waves made his stomach churn. He got seasick. He leaned over the side of the boat and took deep breaths, but found no relief. Will told him to lie down because he looked very unwell. Nick said in a weak voice that he shouldn't have shown off in the morning. He had made fun of the fact that seasickness medicine was for weak people. Now he understood his mistake, but it was too late. 4 hours later, 9 a.m., they reached Marcus's favorite golden spot. The engine was turned off, and preparations began to drop the anchor. Marcus specifically said to hold the rope tight and lower the anchor slowly. Last time they had accidentally lost the anchor. 1 p.m. The sky started turning dark. The storm was approaching. They immediately decided to head back. Corey began lifting the anchor, but the anchor was stuck. He put in all his strength, but the rope remained straight and taut. The anchor didn't budge. Marcus joined in. Then all 4 pulled together, but the anchor was badly jammed in the rocks at the bottom of the sea. The sky was getting darker. Lightning was rumbling. Marcus decided, let's pull with the engine. The engine started. The boat moved forward. The rope stretched further. He told everyone to hold on tight. The boat could jerk hard. He slowly increased the throttle. The engine roared, but the rope from behind was pulling the boat downward. The front of the boat lifted up. The back sank into the water. The boat tilted at a dangerous angle. All 4 were hanging on to the railing. Their eyes were fully fixed on the taut rope at the back. No one saw the wall of danger approaching from the front. A massive wave was rising from ahead. The sky was dark, and that wave looked like a moving wall of water. By the time they noticed the change in light and heard a strange roar, it was too late. That massive wave struck directly at the front of the boat. The boat flipped as if a giant had slapped it with his hand. Everything turned upside down. When they surfaced above the water, they saw the boat had completely capsized. Their safety had now become nothing but the hollow shell of an overturned boat. All four started shouting each other's names to confirm everyone was alive. Marcus told everyone to come near the boat. The overturned boat was floating a little. It could offer support. They tried to right the boat, but it was no use. Then Will remembered the anchor rope is still attached. That's the weight pulling the boat down. But how to cut it? There was no knife. Will dived underwater and cut the rope using the sharp edge of the propeller. Even after cutting the rope, the situation didn't change much. The boat was still overturned. After drifting in the sea for about 30 minutes, a new plan came to Marcus's mind. He said to tie the rope they just cut to one side of the boat, and everyone pull together. Maybe they could flip the boat using the rope. The plan sounded reasonable, so all four got to work. At that same time, back on land, the storm was intensifying. The weather department was reporting that this storm could reach the strength of a Category 2 hurricane. Paula called Nick again, but this time too it went straight to voicemail. She left a message saying the storm looked very dangerous, and she hoped they were heading back. The fear in her voice was clear, but that message too would never be heard, because the phones were sealed away in the sea. After nearly 5 hours of the capsize, all four realized that righting the boat was almost impossible. The boat was heavy, and their strength was rapidly draining in the cold water. Every attempt cost them energy, and in this freezing water, strength was life. Slowly, everyone had to accept that they couldn't flip the boat. Now they had to find a new way. Marcus calmed himself down and thought about what useful things could be retrieved from the boat. He reminded them that there was a cooler in the boat with food and water, and it might be tied with a rope. Will immediately asked, "Where are the life jackets?" Marquis told him they were in the storage on the left side of the cabin. Will said he'd go get them. But Marcus pointed out a big problem. If the cabin was opened, water would flood in and the boat could sink faster. It was a very difficult decision. Let the boat float as long as possible, or take the risk and retrieve the life jackets. After thinking for a while, everyone understood. The boat was going to sink eventually anyway, but the life jackets were needed right now. Without them, they wouldn't survive in the cold water until nightfall. Marcus decided to go himself. As captain, he was taking responsibility, but the problem was that he was wearing thick clothes, which were making it hard for him to dive. He took off his shirt, even if it made him colder. Taking a deep breath, he dived into the water. This time, he was successful. Groping in the dark water, he grabbed the cabin handle. Above, the other three felt the boat sinking a little further, but after just a moment, it stopped. A little while later, Marcus came out of the water, life jackets in hand. The three breathed a sigh of relief. Then he went back down and brought out 2 more life jackets. After resting briefly, he went a third time, and this time came back with a flare gun. This was real hope. A flare meant a chance to send a signal. If any ship passed nearby, maybe they'd see it. There were still about 15 bottles of water left in the cabin. If those could be retrieved, they could hold on longer. This time, Corey said he would go. But as soon as he went down, he came back in seconds. He said frantically that he couldn't see anything. The water was too cold. He wouldn't go again. Just then, a sound came from afar. A ship's horn. All four suddenly burst into loud shouts. They waved their hands, fired the flare. They were screaming like crazy, hoping the ship would see them. But the ship continued in its direction. The sound of the horn slowly faded into the distance. The ship disappeared into the darkness and the storm. Their voices slowly fell silent. The hope of just moments ago had turned back into emptiness. Suddenly, Nick remembered his bag. His phone was in it. If the bag could be found, maybe they could make a call. This thought rekindled hope inside everyone. Nick said he needed a little rest so his body could warm up a bit. Then he'd dive. Meanwhile, to lighten the mood, Will made a joke. He asked Corey if anything could be worse than this. Like Detroit's 0-6 record last year, everyone was exhausted. Still, a faint laugh escaped. Corey said that maybe this was the first time he'd say he wished he was in Detroit right now. Back on land, Paula and Nick's mother were talking on the phone. Both were worried because no one could be reached. Finally, they decided to call the police. Out at sea, Nick gathered his strength, dived, and retrieved the bag. The three were happy. They took out the phones and tried to make calls, but no signal. Nick screamed in anger and frustration. 911 should work everywhere, right? What about satellites? But the truth was, in the middle of the ocean, their phones were useless. The most essential device of the modern world had become nothing but a sealed box here. Marcus said, "Turn off the phones. If there's no signal, we need to save battery. Maybe there'll be a signal somewhere later." Meanwhile, the police had received the report. A pickup truck had been found at the marina with an empty trailer at the back. There was suspicion that the four were stranded at sea. The Coast Guard had been informed. The search operation had begun. But the four stranded at sea didn't know that help was on the way. Night began to deepen. Marquis's condition started deteriorating. His body was shaking violently. His teeth were chattering. He could barely speak, saying he was very cold. Nick explained to him that feeling cold right now is a good sign. It means the body is still fighting. The real danger is when a person stops feeling cold. That's when the body temperature has dropped to a dangerous level, and the brain starts sending wrong signals. To motivate themselves, they repeated the chant that used to be shouted during training. That chant was now not just words, it was the will to stay alive. Just then, Corey noticed the rain had stopped. Nick said maybe God had heard them, but at that very moment, a strange rumbling sound was heard from afar. This was not the sound of lightning. Something big was coming toward them. All four listened carefully. The sound was growing louder, and then they saw it. All four pricked up their ears. That strange rumbling kept getting louder. It was not the sound of lightning. It was different, as if something very large was slicing through the water, heading toward them. Corey heard it clearly too. Everyone held their breath and tried to see through the darkness where this sound was coming from. Movement on the ocean's surface was increasing. Something heavy was moving in the distance above the water. The rumbling had come even closer now. The pattern of the waves was also changing, as if some powerful force was pushing the water. All four became fully alert. Their heartbeats quickened. Amid the cold, exhaustion, and fear, they were trying to understand what was in front of them. The rumbling had come right up to them now. Then a massive wave rushed toward them like a wall, bringing complete destruction with it. Its force was so terrifying that all four were flung from the boat in separate directions. The world started spinning again. Up, down, everything went topsy-turvy. From all sides, the ocean water broke over them and swallowed everything. In their ears, only the sound of twisted screams echoed, muffled and distant, as if pressed underwater. All four were floating on the ocean's surface, in different places. Each one was struggling in the darkness, trying to find each other, trying to find that overturned boat which was now their only support. Suddenly Will shouted he could see the boat. Nick put in all his strength and started swimming in that direction. After a few minutes of searching that felt like hours, all four somehow made it back to the boat and gathered together again. Then Will cried out in pain. His leg had been cut by something and it was bleeding. At that very moment, another large wave came crashing down on them. On the other side, Coast Guard Officer Cruz had not yet received any official report, but at the port, a vehicle had been found with an empty boat trailer attached. It was the only car remaining in the parking lot. No emergency signal had come in, no SOS beacon. Cruz tried to assess the situation. The storm had been moving inward since the afternoon. In such temperatures, if someone falls into the water, their survival time is very limited. He immediately issued an alert, ordered all frequencies to be monitored, gave the command to call on Channel 16, and launched a search and rescue operation. But in the stormy night, very little could be done, and every minute's delay could mean the difference between life and death for those stranded at sea. Conditions at sea were worsening rapidly. Large waves kept rising, throwing all four off the boat repeatedly, and they kept trying to swim back and climb on again. Every collision was draining their strength. Each time climbing back onto the boat was getting harder than before. Suddenly someone shouted, "There's something very large below," like a massive animal. Panic filled the atmosphere. Marcus's reaction was very weak. He was speaking in a trembling voice. Nick kept calling his name, again and again. Marquis said in a broken voice that he felt something was happening inside him, like a pull inward, like the body's control was slipping away. He felt his strength was slowly running out. Nick didn't want to hear any of this. He loudly stopped him and said, "Don't talk like that, like you're giving up. Everyone has to hold on." But Marquis kept repeating, in a very weak voice, that if he was meant to die here, then maybe this was his fate. The salty sea was perhaps his place. He had said in the morning that the sea gave him peace, made him feel like home. Maybe this was his real home. His voice grew even weaker. His eyes began to go blank. Suddenly a faint glimmer appeared in his eyes. He started looking somewhere and murmured he could see his daughter, as if she was smiling, reaching out her arms to embrace him. Nick immediately understood something was wrong. He said loudly, "Your daughter is not here. She is not here." He shook Marcus to bring him back to his senses. But in his eyes there was only confusion and longing. In his weakest moment, his mind was showing him the warmest and most beloved image. Nick kept shouting, "They are not here. This is all an illusion." Someone asked in panic, "What's happening?" Nick said in a heavy voice, "Hypothermia." Marquis's body temperature had dropped to a dangerous level. The body was shutting down. The brain was being affected. That's why he was experiencing hallucinations. Nick said he needs warmth. Body heat. They all crowd around him and try to keep him warm with their body heat. That's their only option right now. All four pressed together. With Marquis in the middle, standing in the cold water, they were trying to give him their remaining warmth. But their own warmth was also rapidly draining. How much longer could they save him? The night was long. The storm continued. Their life's flame was slowly flickering out. Marquis was the first to be in danger. But everyone knew if the situation didn't change, the rest wouldn't last long either. In the darkness and cold, all four held on to each other with everything they had. Fighting against nature's mercilessness with their last ounce of courage, they didn't know if morning would come, if the rescue team would find them. Until this moment, they were alive. They were still fighting. Back on land, Paula left another message for Nick. She said she was very worried. She mentioned that Marquis' truck was the only one left in the parking lot. She was trying to convince herself that maybe all four friends were somewhere having a drink with their phones off. Nick's mother was also waiting, anxiously. Marquis' wife, Rebecca, had also called. Neither woman had any news of her husband. Rebecca said Marquis had told her he might be late returning, but a switched-off phone seemed strange. She tried to appear strong and said the four were strong men. Nothing will happen. After hanging up, both women kept reassuring each other, but the fear inside was growing. Conditions at sea were worsening rapidly. Will was trying to keep Marcus conscious. For a while, he steadied himself, but then started saying strange things. His words were incomprehensible. Suddenly, he became uncontrollable and started struggling violently. His strength was astonishing. Even though he was in an extremely weakened state, an athlete's body was still pushing sudden strength into him. The other three had to hold him together. He was screaming, "Let me go." His eyes had gone blank. It was clear he could no longer tell the difference between reality and hallucination. Perhaps a terrifying scene was playing in his mind, and the people holding him, he was seeing them as enemies. On the other side, a report came into the Coast Guard office that Rebecca had called. She told them that her husband Marquis and his 3 friends had gone to sea in the morning and had been missing since. Hearing this, Cruz learned that Marquis and Corey had previously been professional football players. 4 strong men stranded about 110 kilometers out in the deep sea. In a terrible storm, the sun had set, and there was no signal, Cruz said in a grave voice. Hypothermia is the most frightening death, especially for people who have low body fat. Once the body temperature drops below 35 degrees, the veins start contracting, muscles begin to fail, the brain is affected, confusion and delirium begin. And finally, the body surrenders completely. He immediately changed the situation to distress, a state of serious danger. Fixed-wing aircraft and Black Hawk helicopters immediately took off. GPS records were requested from Rebecca so the coordinates of their fishing area could be obtained. With the roar of engines, rescue planes flew off into the dark and dangerous sea. Back at sea, rain started again. Nick suddenly realized this was a chance. He shouted to Marcus, "Open your mouth and drink the rainwater." At that same moment, he felt that Corey's heart was beating extremely fast, as if it would burst out of his chest. This, too, was the effect of hypothermia. The body forces the heart to beat faster in order to maintain blood circulation, but the benefit is very little. Nick said his own heart was beating the same way. Someone asked in panic, "Does that mean we are going to die?" Nick said firmly, "No one is going to die." In the sky, rescue planes were flying. The pilot reported on the radio that nothing was clearly visible. Visibility was almost zero. The stormy waves and layers of rain were blurring everything. Searching in these conditions was like looking for a black needle in the dark. Every minute's delay could take someone's life. The people stranded at sea had no idea that planes were circling above them. They could only feel darkness, cold, and fear. Marcus was nearly unconscious. His breathing was weak. Corey's mental balance was breaking down. Will's wound had been soaking in salt water for a long time. Perhaps it had become infected. Only Nick was there, trying to hold himself together. But even he could feel the falling strength within himself. His body was also reaching its limit. All he had left was his willpower. He remembered his father's voice, "We never give up." He told himself he has to hold on. He has to keep everyone else holding on, because once his eyes close, maybe they'll never open again. Back on land, Paula arrived at Rebecca's house. Rebecca said frantically that the Coast Guard should intensify the search. They need to find the GPS that has Marquis' fishing points saved. She was so panicked she couldn't find it and was breaking down. Paula calmed her down and reminded her that she herself had said she needed to stay strong. A little while later, the GPS was found. They turned it on and found the saved coordinates. Those coordinates were immediately sent to the Coast Guard. They marked the point on the map and sent all rescue aircraft there. At sea, the situation worsened further. Both Marcus and Corey were in bad shape. Corey was saying he felt very hot. Will said, "This is an illusion. The mind is deceiving you." Just then, another massive wave came and swept Marcus away. His life jacket slipped off and he sank into the sea. Nick screamed his name. The pain in his voice was unbelievable. Will kept trying to find him, but found nothing. Corey fell into complete delirium and started screaming. Now 3 remained out of 4, and one of those 3 was barely conscious. Marcus's loss was not just the loss of a friend, it was the shattering of hope. Just then they heard the sound of a plane. Nick and Will gathered all their remaining strength and started shouting at the top of their lungs. Nick switched on his phone's flashlight with trembling hands. The weak light flickered in the darkness. He waved it like a madman so someone could see it. An observer on the plane said he might have seen a faint light. Everyone held their breath. The area was examined with binoculars and night vision. But after investigation, the response came that was just the reflection of lightning in the water. The weather was worsening further. They had to gain altitude. The order to return was given. Below, in the sea, Nick and Will kept shouting. The sound of the plane slowly faded and then disappeared. Hope had come and then broken again. The rescue plane had passed over them, but in the storm and darkness, they had missed each other. Cruz had to call Rebecca and inform her that the search had been stopped due to weather. After the storm, they would try again. Rebecca hung up and told Paula. Both tried to console themselves that maybe they were stuck somewhere, maybe they were alive, but Rebecca admitted that a strange fear had settled in her heart. Morning began to dawn. Out at sea, only Nick and Will could be seen now. Corey had disappeared too. Nick kept calling his name. His throat had gone hoarse. No answer came. Will finally said the words they both already knew. They're gone. Marcus and Corey, both. Nick couldn't accept this truth. Yesterday there were 4 friends. They had left laughing. Now, only 2 remained, floating in the vast ocean. Will said in a breaking voice that Marcus and Corey were stronger than them, yet the sea had defeated them. He asked, how much longer could they hold on? Nick said that their low body fat had hurt them. His clothes were wet, but still giving him some warmth. He told Will to find something to wear, but Will refused. He didn't want to get into the water again. Just then, Nick saw a shadow below the water. A shark. They scrambled onto the boat in a panic. Will's wound was still bleeding. Nick explained to him that sharks look for fish. They won't attack us. But the fear was growing. Will asked, did Nick go to church? When death is staring you in the face, a person starts thinking about God and the soul. If the final mental moment itself becomes infinite, where is God? What happens after death? Nick said he didn't remember. It had been a long time. Will asked, had he become an atheist? Nick said angrily that he just lives in reality. What's the point of asking for help from a God who let his friends die? Will said, don't be angry. Don't leave God. Nick said in a tired voice. He hadn't left anything. These words were actually 2 different ways of facing death. Will was seeking support in faith. Nick was fighting in anger and stubbornness. But whatever the approach, the sea was in front of them, merciless and cold. At the base, morning activity had begun. Captain Cruz clearly stated that the family should be informed immediately, so that they don't receive the worst news from a sudden TV report. An officer asked whether the operation should be changed to a search and recovery mission, meaning just finding bodies. The captain firmly refused. He said, not yet. Hope still remains. After daylight, they'd have more advantage. He also ordered a large rescue ship to be dispatched. The ship's siren sounded. Crew members were gathered and told they needed to go searching for a small boat near St. Petersburg, where 4 people were missing and the boat may have capsized. The captain told everyone that in this weather, electronic equipment is often unreliable, so keep your eyes fixed on the water's surface. Nothing beats the human eye. The sea was still cold, deep, and merciless, and the 2 of them were dependent on its mercy. The sun was rising higher, but the cold didn't lessen. Their bodies were going numb. Nick could feel his fingers stiffening. His lips were trembling. Every breath was becoming harder. Will's condition was also deteriorating. Both understood that if help didn't arrive soon, it would be hard to hold on much longer. Still, they kept looking at each other, as if just staying together was keeping them alive. The sky was beginning to lighten, but relief was still far away. They didn't know if anyone was searching for them. They only knew they were still breathing. And as long as breath remained, the fight was not over. Back on land, Nick's mother Marcia learns that the Coast Guard has stopped the search and rescue mission. Hearing this, she bursts out in fury. Out at sea, Nick's fingers are numb from the cold. He is screaming in pain. Another huge wave comes and slams both of them underwater. They put in every ounce of strength and come back up. Will says this is a very bad idea. They could drown. Nick replies they can drown anyway. But at least, if they stay tied to the boat, there'll be one chance. After some hesitation, Will also ties himself to the boat. Now, no matter how strong the waves, they won't be separated. But if the boat sinks, they'll go down with it. At the Coast Guard base, Marcia questions an officer. She asks why is the mission being referred to as a recovery operation in the news. The officer explains that over 200 people are involved in the search. A patrol ship is also deployed, but in bad weather, pilots cannot be put in danger. The storm will end in about 1 hour, and then the search will restart. There was fear in Marcia's eyes. She asks, "Do you really think he's alive?" The officer says she should keep faith. They will do everything they can. Marcia nods, because she had nothing left but hope. Out at sea, both are repeatedly knocked down by waves and then climb back onto the boat. They are completely broken, but still alive. Suddenly they hear the sound of an aircraft. Both wave their hands with their last remaining strength. Will says it's daytime now. They'll surely see us. But the plane flies on without any response. It slowly disappears into the sky. Both watch helplessly as it leaves. It's daytime now. Their bright life jackets are clearly visible. Still, no one had seen them. Hope had come and gone again. After a short silence, Nick says in a tired voice, "They have been in the water for 24 hours. Will asks how long will the Coast Guard keep the search stopped. Nick says he doesn't know. Will says that if they need to go into the water to find food, they should go now while there's still light. Nick agrees. He thinks about taking off his clothes, but Will says he'll go himself. He takes a deep breath and gets into the water. Groping in the dark cabin, he finally finds a plastic bag. He comes back up, inside mustard-flavored Pringles. Will says with a faint smile that he doesn't like this flavor, but both were hungry. They start eating quickly. Suddenly, Will points in the distance and asks, "Is that land?" Nick looks. In the distance, something was visible that looked like the silhouette of land. Both were seeing the same thing. Nick takes out his phone, but his fingers are numb. Will operates the phone. The screen shows no signal. Nick asks in confusion, "Could this be a hallucination?" Will says, "How can two people have the same hallucination? No aircraft had been seen for hours." Will says either we swim there now, or never. We can't survive another night. Both untie the ropes and start swimming in that direction. But after a short while, Will realizes something is wrong. He shouts, "That's not land. It's an illusion. The body's weakness is playing tricks on the mind." Even worse, when he turns back and looks toward the boat is not visible either. They had swum so far, chasing the illusion, that they had gone very far from the boat. Both shout each other's names. Frantically swimming through the water, trying to find the overturned boat. Finally, Nick finds the boat and clings to it. He keeps calling for Will. A little while later, Will also makes it to the boat. Both are together again. At the Coast Guard base, Captain Cruz was constantly coordinating the search operation, but no target had been found yet. A report came in that they had searched 66 nautical miles and would continue until dark. Nothing could be seen on the ocean's surface. Those people had now been adrift at sea for 30 hours. Out at sea, Nick notices that Will has become very, very quiet. He asks, "Are you okay?" Will says in a scattered voice that he's just thinking. He was thinking about why the boat hadn't fully sunk yet. He was also thinking if he died, what would people say at his funeral? He even began to doubt would his body ever even be found. Will's mind was no longer working properly. He starts murmuring that he should have married that girl and gotten her a 1.5-carat diamond ring. He imagines if he had married her, she would have stopped him from going on this trip. Then he'd be at home right now, planning a future with her, planning children. Will says in a weak voice to Nick, "Can you tell his parents something?" He couldn't even form complete sentences, just kept repeating the same thing, "Tell my mom." Nick refuses. He says he will not tell his parents anything, because Will himself will go and tell them. But Will keeps repeating the same thing over and over. Then suddenly, he says he feels very hot. He's not feeling cold. He says he just wants to be a little warmer. Nick understands this is the final stage of hypothermia. When a person starts feeling heat instead of cold, it means the brain has stopped sensing the body temperature. Death is very close. Will begins taking off his clothes. Nick stops him with all his strength and shouts, "Don't do that." Just then, another large wave comes and sweeps Will into the water. Nick grabs the rope and with all his strength pulls him back, but by then Will had already lost consciousness. another tremendous wave comes. This time, Will's body is lost in the waves and disappears into the dark sea. Nick screams Will's name, loudly, again and again. But in response, only the sound of the ocean comes. Will was gone, Marcus was gone, Corey was gone too. Once there were 4 close friends. Now only Nick remained, alone, floating in the infinite sea. He screams toward the sky in anger. He swears. He lets out all the pain, rage, and helplessness from within. He asks himself, why am I the only one who survived? Why did the other 3 have to go? His father's voice echoes in his mind, never be among those who give up. But in this moment, Nick couldn't understand who he was fighting for. All his friends were dead. He was alone in the ocean. Rescue was perhaps never coming. But he was still alive. He was still breathing right now. As long as breath remains, he must keep fighting. He considered this a debt to his 3 friends. He had to stay alive, so he could tell their story to the world, so that their families could know how bravely they had fought until their last breath. Nick holds on tightly to the boat. The darkness deepens further. He continues his battle for life alone. At the base, an officer addresses everyone, saying he understands what they're all feeling, but they cannot leave from here. Hope is their greatest strength, and it's the last thing they still have. He asks everyone to trust in God, to pray that those boys are found and brought home safely. Sometime later, the order comes the search operation is to be ended and all units are to return. Many sailors become disheartened. Still, some say to each other, let's search for just a few more minutes. They didn't want to give up. They wanted to make one final attempt. Back on land, Paula calls Nick again. The call goes to voicemail again. Leaving a message, she says, it's very late. Everyone is very worried. She jokes, are you building suspense? But within just a few seconds, her voice breaks. She says she hopes everyone is fine. Maybe they're outside signal range. But there's a fear in her heart that maybe she'll never see him again. Her voice breaks, and she hangs up, crying. Marcia comes over to her and takes her in her arms. Marcia says she's certain Nick is alive. She can feel that he is out there somewhere, still. She says, let's both talk to him together, from our hearts, so that wherever he is, he knows he is not alone. Both women hold each other and weep, and pray toward the open sea. Out at sea, Nick is now completely exhausted. He is sometimes conscious, sometimes half unconscious. The sound of the sea echoes wildly all around him. He shouts into the empty ocean, but his voice goes to waste. It had been 22 hours of drifting at sea. Nick begins having hallucinations. He hears the laughter of his friends. He sees moments spent with them. It all feels so real, as if he could reach out and touch it. But as soon as he tries to grab it, everything disappears into the air. Then Nick makes a decision. He begins untying the rope that had kept him tied to the boat, the same rope that had saved his life in the storm. His fingers were frozen and heavy, but he slowly undoes the knot. The rope goes slack. Now he was free. Nick lies down on the boat on his back. Below the white overturned boat, above the blue sky, he closes his eyes. Now he was neither fighting, nor shouting, nor waiting for the help that perhaps was never coming. His 3 friends had gone. Now perhaps he too should go to them. He thinks his parents will understand. They believe he tried his hardest. He really did try his hardest. His breathing becomes slow and calm. His body goes limp. The sunlight gives warmth to his face. The waves gently rock the boat. Everything feels strangely peaceful, as if there's no more pain, no cold, no loneliness. He thinks maybe I'll just fall asleep and it will all be over. He imagines that in his dream, he'll meet Marcus, Corey, and Will. They'll all be together again. They'll never be separated again. But at that very moment, a rescue boat passes by. They see him, at that exact moment when Nick had closed his eyes, when he had finally stopped fighting. That's when the miracle happens. At the base, a report immediately comes in. a target has been found. Captain Cruz instantly orders all helicopters to head to that location. He had been waiting for this moment for 2 days. The rescue helicopter takes off and reaches the location. The observer reports one adult male is visible. The helicopter hovers over Nick. Nick raises his head. He sees the helicopter, but he is so weak he can't tell if this is real or just another hallucination. At the base, everyone is holding their breath. Captain Cruz asks, is he alive? A few seconds later, the reply comes, target is alive, but the captain doesn't celebrate. He immediately asks, where are the other 3? He says the search must continue. They have to find the remaining 3 as well. Nick is pulled up. He is asked, what is your name? In a heavy, broken voice, he says, my name is Nick. That name travels through the radio to the base. Marcia's phone rings. She picks up the call and screams out loud. She and Paula embrace each other and weep, but on the other side, another phone rings in another home. No one there picks it up because there, it had already been understood that their loved one was not coming back. The helicopter flies towards safety. Below, the white overturned boat keeps floating in the sea. That same boat that had witnessed 4 friends, laughter, fear, courage, and final moments. Now it floated alone, as a witness to this tragic story. The search continues for several more days, but Marcus, Corey, and Will are never found. The ocean had taken them in. Nick was the sole survivor, the only person who could tell the story of that sea. He survived, but in one sense, a part of him remained in that ocean forever. His 3 friends' smiles, their courage, their final battle, all of it became a part of his life. He is alive so that he can remember them, so the world can know how they fought until their very last breath.